What happens when one overzealous HOA Karen decides that cozy backyard fire pits are a threat to the very fabric of the neighborhood? In this story, Karen takes her role as HOA president to the extreme, banning fire pits and launching a full-scale war on esmores, bonfires, and backyard gatherings. But when the community fights back with secret bonfires, hidden fire pits, and one explosive HOA showdown, Karen learns the hard way that you can't extinguish the spirit of a united neighborhood. Stick around to see how Karen's obsession with control leads to her own fiery downfall. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below if you've ever dealt with an over-the-top HOA. Your support helps us bring more wild stories to life. Maplewood Grove wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a community. A place where front porches were more than decorations, where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and where neighbors actually knew each other's names. But if there was one tradition that truly brought the residents together, it was the backyard fire pits. Every weekend, families would gather around crackling flames, roasting marshmallows, sharing stories, and letting the warmth chase away the evening chill. Daniel, a longtime resident, loved hosting these gatherings. His backyard was the heart of the block, string lights overhead, lawn chairs circled around a modest fire pit, and the scent of toasted marshmallows drifting into the night air. It was simple. It was peaceful. Until Karen showed up. Karen had recently been elected as the new HOA president, a title she wore like a badge of superiority. She wasn't interested in community spirit or neighborly bonds. No, Karen had one mission: control. Armed with her ever-present clipboard and an inflated sense of authority, Karen viewed herself as the guardian of neighborhood standards. And to her, backyard fire pits weren't cozy gathering spots. They were potential hazards. It started with an email. A long, formal message filled with legal jargon and passive-aggressive undertones. Subject: Important HOA update, new safety regulation. Effective immediately, all outdoor fire pits are prohibited within Maplewood Grove. This decision has been made to ensure community safety, prevent air pollution, and maintain the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. Violations will result in fines of up to $200 per incident. Karen, HOA president. Daniel stared at the email, baffled. Since when are fire pits a problem? He muttered, glancing out the window at his perfectly safe, modest fire pit. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat exploded. This has to be a joke, right? We've had bonfires here for years without an issue. Who even voted on this? I don't remember a meeting. But it wasn't a joke. The next day, Karen was out patrolling the neighborhood, armed with her clipboard and a smug grin, inspecting backyards from the sidewalk and leaving violation notices taped to fences like unwanted decorations. Daniel wasn't the only one frustrated. His neighbor, Mike, a laid-back guy who loved grilling and hosting weekend BBQs, was fuming. What's next? Banning BBQs because the smoke offends her delicate sensibilities, he grumbled. And then there was Linda, a single mom who cherished her backyard fire pit as a way to unwind after long days. This is ridiculous, she said, holding the violation notice Karen had left on her gate. She can't just take away something that's part of our lives. But Karen thought she could. She strutted through the neighborhood like a self-appointed sheriff, issuing warnings, snapping photos of fire pits, and citing obscure HOA regulations to justify her ban. At the next HOA meeting, residents showed up in droves, demanding answers. Daniel stood up, holding the printed email in his hand. Who decided this? There was no vote, no discussion. This isn't how a community works. Karen's response was dripping with condescension. As HOA president, I have the authority to implement emergency safety measures without a vote if I believe there's an immediate risk to the community. Immediate risk? Mike scoffed. We've been having bonfires here for years without a single incident. The only emergency I see is your need to control everything. The room erupted in murmurs of agreement, but Karen didn't flinch. Rules are rules. If you don't like them, perhaps you should reconsider living in a community with standards. And just like that, the meeting ended. No vote, no discussion. Just Karen's rule, stamped and sealed. But Karen had underestimated something far more powerful than HOA bylaws, the determination of a community that refuses to be controlled. As Daniel left the meeting, he turned to Mike and Linda. If Karen thinks she can kill our traditions with an email and a clipboard, she's in for a surprise. And with that, the first spark of rebellion was lit. Karen's fire pit ban spread through Maplewood Grove like a bad smell, unwelcome, obnoxious, and impossible to ignore. But instead of extinguishing the community's spirit, it ignited something else entirely: rebellion. At first, it was small acts of defiance. Daniel hosted his usual Friday night gathering, but instead of lighting his fire pit, he set up a circle of candles. His friends sat around sipping drinks, laughing as if nothing had changed. "What's next?" Mike joked, holding up a tiny tea light. "Karen gonna fine us for open flames under 2 inches tall." But the jokes masked growing frustration. This wasn't just about fire pits anymore. It was about control. Karen had imposed her will without a vote, without input, and without any real reason beyond her own obsession with safety and aesthetics. So the neighborhood decided to get creative. Phase 1: the secret bonfires. Daniel's backyard became ground zero for the underground gatherings. Residents whispered plans like they were organizing a covert mission. Fire pits were disguised, hidden behind tall privacy screens or cleverly concealed under collapsible patio tables. Code Ember became their inside joke, a signal that a fire was lit and the coast was clear. The first secret bonfire felt exhilarating. The flames flickered like a beacon of resistance, casting warm light on defiant smiles. Neighbors passed around marshmallows, sharing stories of HOA horror tales from years past. But, of course, Karen noticed. She couldn't stand the idea that people were still enjoying themselves without her permission. Her nightly patrols became more intense. Armed with a flashlight and her trusty clipboard, she roamed the neighborhood, peering over fences like a nosy raccoon. She'd knock on gates uninvited, demanding to inspect backyards under the pretense of ensuring compliance. One evening, Daniel's group was mid-Esmore session when they heard the familiar click of Karen's heels on the sidewalk. "Code Ember," Mike hissed, snuffing out the fire with a bucket of sand while Linda grabbed the marshmallow sticks. Karen appeared at the gate moments later, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "I received a report of an unauthorized fire pit," she announced, her voice dripping with self-importance. Daniel opened the gate, feigning confusion. "Fire pit? Nope, just having a candlelight chat." Karen's eyes narrowed as she scanned the yard. No fire in sight, just a suspiciously large pile of sand in the middle of a circle of chairs. She issued a warning anyway, scribbling aggressively on her clipboard. "Consider this your final notice. Further violations will result in fines and possible legal action." The moment she left, Daniel turned to his friends. "Legal action? For roasting marshmallows?" Mike grinned. "Guess we're criminals now." Word spread fast. Soon, other neighbors started hosting their own secret gatherings, sharing tips on how to avoid detection. Some disguised their fire pits as large potted plants during the day. Others built underground pits with hidden covers. Karen, now obsessed, ramped up her patrols. She started snapping photos over fences, writing violation notices based on the mere suspicion of smoke, and even threatened to call the fire department on Linda when she saw steam rising from her kettle grill. But Karen's paranoia only united the neighborhood further. The group chats buzzed with code words. "Hot spot" equals active bonfire. "Karen on patrol" equals time to douse the flames. "Smoke screen" equals someone distract Karen while the others enjoy their night. Neighbors who barely knew each other before were now bonding over their shared frustration. Karen had unintentionally done something remarkable. She'd created a community. But while Karen thought she was tightening her grip, Daniel and his friends were planning something bigger. Something that would not just resist her rule, but expose her for the hypocrite she really was. Because what Karen didn't realize was that while she was busy policing everyone else's backyards, she'd overlooked one very important detail: her own. Karen's obsession with extinguishing backyard bonfires had evolved from strict enforcement to an all-out crusade. Her nightly patrols became routine. Neighbors would spot her marching through Maplewood Grove, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other, like some self-appointed neighborhood sheriff on the lookout for rogue marshmallow roasters. But Karen wasn't satisfied with just issuing warnings. She wanted control. One morning, Daniel opened his mailbox to find an envelope stamped with the bold letters, HOA Mandatory Compliance Notice. Inside was a formal document. Effective immediately. All residents are required to remove existing backyard fire pits from their properties. Failure to comply within 14 days will result in daily fines of $250 and potential legal action for noncompliance. Karen, HOA president. $250 a day? Daniel nearly laughed out loud. It was absurd. But as he walked around the neighborhood that day, he saw the same envelopes poking out of mailboxes, the same looks of frustration on his neighbors' faces. Karen had gone too far. At an emergency neighborhood gathering, ironically held around a hidden, well-disguised fire pit, Daniel, Mike, and Linda addressed the crowd. "She's not just trying to ban fire pits," Daniel said. "She's trying to control how we live in our own homes." The neighbors nodded in agreement. It wasn't just about fire pits anymore. It was about reclaiming their community from one woman's obsession with power. If Karen wanted a battle, the neighborhood was ready. Mike disguised his fire pit as a large planter. During the day, it was filled with flowers. At night, he'd carefully remove the top layer, revealing a hidden flame beneath. Linda converted her backyard into an elaborate Zen garden with a decorative rock arrangement that conveniently doubled as a fire pit when rearranged. Daniel installed a small water feature that, with the flip of a hidden switch, drained to reveal, you guessed it, a fire pit. The neighborhood became a labyrinth of hidden flames and clever disguises, like a suburban version of a spy movie. Karen, of course, was losing her mind. She doubled down on her patrols, inspecting properties with binoculars, accusing residents of violations without evidence, and even proposing the installation of HOA security cameras to monitor backyards. She claimed it was for community safety, but everyone knew the truth. Karen couldn't stand the idea that people were still enjoying themselves without her permission. Her desperation led to her most outrageous stunt yet, calling the fire department on Daniel. It happened on a crisp Saturday evening. Daniel was hosting a small gathering. No fire this time, just friends chatting under string lights. Suddenly, flashing red lights lit up the street. A fire truck pulled up, and out stepped a confused team of firefighters. Karen appeared out of nowhere, waving her clipboard. "They have an illegal fire pit," she screeched, pointing dramatically toward Daniel's backyard. The firefighters exchanged awkward glances. "Ma'am, there's no fire," one of them said after a quick inspection. But there was smoke. Karen insisted, her face flushed with frustration. "Yeah," Daniel replied calmly, holding up a mug from the hot chocolate. The firefighters left shortly after, clearly annoyed that their time had been wasted. But for Daniel and his neighbors, that incident was the final spark. "She wants to play with fire?" Mike muttered after the firefighters drove off. "Fine. Let's give her a bonfire she'll never forget." What Karen didn't realize was that while she'd been busy policing everyone else, she had her own dirty secret burning in plain sight. And Daniel was about to expose it. The fire department stunt had been the final straw. Karen's obsession with controlling Maplewood Grove had spiraled beyond absurdity, but Daniel and the rest of the neighborhood weren't just angry anymore. They were determined. That's when Linda made a discovery that would turn the tables. One afternoon, while walking her dog past Karen's meticulously trimmed hedge, Linda noticed something unusual on Karen's patio. A tall stainless steel patio heater, the kind powered by propane with an open flame. It flickered gently in the breeze, the glow unmistakable even in the daylight. She snapped a quick photo and sent it to the neighborhood group chat with a message. "So, fire pits are dangerous, but this is fine?" The irony was delicious. Karen had been terrorizing the neighborhood over fire safety, all while enjoying her own open flame device. The hypocrisy was too perfect to ignore. Daniel, Mike, and Linda got to work. They didn't want just one photo. They needed undeniable proof. Over the next few days, neighbors discreetly collected evidence. Photos and videos of Karen sitting beside her patio heater, sipping wine, completely oblivious. A copy of the HOA's own bylaws, which clearly stated that open flame devices, including fire pits and outdoor heaters, are subject to the same safety regulations. Screenshots from Karen's previous emails, where she claimed the fire pit ban was due to the dangers of open flames. The piece de resistance. A video clip showing Karen lecturing about fire safety at an HOA meeting with her patio heater blazing in the background through her sliding glass door. It was time for the ultimate showdown. The community center was packed. The air buzzed with anticipation as residents filled every chair, many holding printed violation notices Karen had issued over the past weeks. Daniel stood near the front, a folder of evidence in hand, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with excitement. Karen arrived last, her clipboard clutched like a security blanket. She scanned the room, her usual smug confidence plastered across her face. "Let's begin," she said sharply, tapping her pen against the podium. I'd like to address the ongoing issue of noncompliance with the fire pit ban. Daniel stood abruptly. Actually, I'd like to address something first. Karen's eyes narrowed. This isn't on the agenda. Is now, Daniel replied, his voice steady. He walked to the front, connected his laptop to the projector, and displayed the first photo. Karen's patio heater, flames flickering proudly. Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's expression didn't falter at first. That's not the same as a fire pit, she snapped. Oh. Daniel clicked to the next slide, the HOA bylaw highlighting that patio heaters fall under the same regulation. Karen's face reddened. It's for warmth, not recreation, she stammered. Daniel smiled. Funny because we use our fire pits for warmth too. And Esmorus. The final nail in the coffin was a video. Karen preaching about fire safety with her patio heater glowing behind her. The hypocrisy was undeniable. The room erupted. So we've been fined while you broke your own rules? You threatened legal action while you had an open flame on your patio? Double standards much? Karen tried to regain control, her voice rising over the crowd. I'm the HOA president. I was acting in the community's best interest. But no one was listening anymore. Stephanie, a previously quiet HOA board member, stood up. A motion to overturn the fire pit ban and remove Karen from her position as HOA president. Hands shot up across the room, unanimous. Karen stood frozen, her grip on the clipboard tightening as if it could anchor her to the power she'd just lost. Without another word, she stormed out, the door slamming behind her, a fitting exit for someone who'd burned more bridges than firewood. But the story wasn't over yet. The neighborhood had one last thing planned. With Karen officially removed from her role as HOA president, the neighborhood of Maplewood Grove felt like it had collectively exhaled. The clipboard that once symbolized her power was gone, replaced by the laughter and camaraderie she had tried so hard to suppress. But the residents weren't content with just removing her from power. They wanted to celebrate their victory in the most fitting way possible. The plan? A neighborhood-wide bonfire party. Flyers went up overnight. Maplewood Grove Freedom Bonfire. Join us for Esmore's stories and celebration as we say goodbye to AOA tyranny. Saturday at 7 p.m., bring your fire pits and your marshmallows. When the night arrived, the entire neighborhood transformed into a festival of flames. Dozens of fire pits dotted front yards and backyards, their warm glow reflecting the spirit of a community reunited. Children ran around with sparklers. Neighbors shared food and drinks, and laughter echoed through the streets. Daniel stood by his restored fire pit, flipping marshmallows as he chatted with Mike and Linda. Who knew a little flame could light such a fire in this neighborhood? Daniel joked, handing Mike a perfectly toasted s'more. Mike grinned. Yeah, it turns out Karen was the best thing to happen to Maplewood Grove. She brought us all together, just not the way she planned. As if on cue, Karen appeared. She stood at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, watching the festivities with a face that could curdle milk. The flickering flames reflected in her eyes, but the fire wasn't hers to control anymore. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The sight of the entire neighborhood, united and thriving despite her efforts, was the ultimate defeat. Karen's house soon went dark. Over the next few weeks, her blinds remained closed, her car rarely moved, and whispers floated through the neighborhood. Rumors that she was planning to sell her home and move somewhere she could find a community with proper standards. But Maplewood Grove had learned an important lesson. Rules don't build a community, people do. The new HOA board, led by Stephanie, rewrote the fire pit policy to focus on reasonable safety guidelines rather than outright bans. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were now close friends, bound together by their shared experience. Daniel looked around at the glowing fire pits, the smiling faces, and the vibrant, lively neighborhood. Funny, he said, taking a deep breath of the crisp night air. All it took to bring us together was one woman trying to tear us apart. Mike chuckled, raising his marshmallow stick like a toast. To Karen, the spark we didn't know we needed. The crowd laughed, and the fires burned on, not just in the pits, but in the hearts of every neighbor who stood up, fought back, and reclaimed their community. Karen's reign was over. But Maplewood Grove? It was just getting started. And that's how one neighborhood stood up to an over-the-top HOA Karen who thought she could ban backyard fire pits and control the community. In the end, her obsession with power was no match for the spirit of neighbors united by friendship, Esmores. and a whole lot of hidden fire pits. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with your own wild HOA experiences. We love hearing your stories, and your support helps us keep sharing these unbelievable tales. Thanks for watching, and remember, you can try to ban the fire, but you'll never kill the spark.